Good evening, and welcome to another episode of Tales from the Darkness. Gather round and try to stay in the light. Some of the others from the dark aren't quite as civil as I am, and I hate cleaning up that mess. I feel its stare drilling into my soul by I'm the Wasp. It all started when I visited an old house to decide if I should buy it. An old couple had lived there previously, and when the husband died, the wife decided to move away. The man was a cop and, out of paranoia, had set up multiple motion detectors and cameras, which didn't work anymore, or so the old woman told me. She also told me that the house would get very cold during the winter, and the heating system used oil to operate. It was beautifully painted brown and had a tin roof. The old woman was giving me a tour of the inside of the house. From the inside, it was kind of like a maze. There was a kitchen, a bedroom, a guest room, a basement, a living room, and of course the bathroom. The kitchen was small but cozy, just perfect for a person who lives alone. The bedroom walls had light orange-colored wallpaper which had flowers on it. The floor was made of light brown parquet, which was in every room and in the halls. Next, I went to see the bathroom, which had 2 square-shaped windows. Through them you could see the nearby forest. From the bedroom door, the kitchen was on the right side, and to the left was a hall which took you to the bathroom. A few steps away from the bedroom door, and on the right side, there was the living room. At this point, I was really excited about the house and its reasonable price. "This is perfect, Mrs. Rogers. I'll definitely take it," I said excitedly while handing her the money. I couldn't believe that I would get to live in a house this beautiful in the middle of nature. "Very well, you shall have it," she answered with a smile while leaning on her cane. She was around 70 years old and had a bad leg. I asked her what had happened earlier, and she said she had tripped a long time ago, but it's okay. She then took the money I had handed her and put it into her purse and gave me the keys to the house. "But there is something you should know if you want to have a good time living here." "What is it, Mrs. Rogers?" I asked, interested. "The basement is in ruins. You could hurt yourself, so don't go down there for anything," she said firmly, not breaking eye contact. I used the whole day to unload furniture and put things in the rooms that I wanted to. After placing everything where I saw it to be pleasing, I made myself some food before going to sleep. Exhaustion was creeping up on me, and while making some cup noodles, a thump could be heard coming from the basement. Making my way to the hatch, I tried opening it, but it was stuck. I went to get the keys the old woman had given me to the house, but none of them fit. Tired and my limbs aching, I decided to just finish eating the food and go to sleep. I'd find a way to open the hatch in the morning. After eating and brushing my teeth, I went to lay under the covers in bed. I began listening. It was almost silent, except for the clock ticking, and a faint creaking could be heard coming from the hall behind the wall to the left of me. "It's an old house, it's supposed to do that," I told myself. Every time I couldn't sleep, I'd just lay on my right side until it would eventually happen. I tried doing that, and it worked perfectly. The sleep was nice and deep. It was 2:33 a.m. when I had awoken from my sleep. I felt tired and annoyed at the same time. My throat was dry, so I decided to make my way into the kitchen and drink a glass of water. On my way, there was a mirror. I loved mirrors, only not during the dark. I walked past the mirror into the kitchen where I got some water from the sink. Walking back to my room, I saw something fast in my peripheral vision to the right, across the mirror, which startled me, and I let out a manly, high-pitched scream. Feeling stupid, I laughed at myself. Laying in the bed, I thought about the basement and why she was so strict about it. A minute later, it hit me, the absolute terror and paranoia of being stared at. I looked left at the door. It was open because I like to keep it that way so the air can change freely. There was a hand, with sharp claws barely visible and a glowing red eye. My eyes widened and my heart started to race. What the hell is that? I raised the blanket over my head in fear and kept still for a time that was probably only a few minutes, but it felt like hours. After gathering the courage to look, I dropped the blanket and looked at the door, and the eye was gone. Was it ever even there? I had broken out in sweat and felt terrified. I tried to stay up in my bed as long as I could, but sleep eventually came and I dozed off. The next morning came. I had slept pretty bad, and the last night's shenanigans didn't feel too nice at all. The thing I saw could have even come up and licked my face when I had fallen asleep if it wanted to. It could have run its sharp nails up my spine and dragged me to whatever hellhole it came from if it wanted. Maybe it wanted to toy with me, make me question my own sanity. The reality of everything slowly started appearing to me. I am completely powerless if what I saw was not in my head. I got up from bed and made my way to the kitchen and made myself a cup of coffee and 2 sandwiches to eat. I spent the morning questioning my own sanity and the reality of the events when I finally remembered the basement. She had told me not to go there. I approached the hatch and tried to open it. It opened. Something had unstuck it. This is peculiar, I told myself. My hands were shaking and I felt nervous. How could it be unstuck? There could be anything in there. I slowly stepped down into the basement. It was filled with books, and there were multiple paintings hanging from the walls. Everything was so dusty, it was clear that the room hadn't been used for a long time. It looked like a workroom. The air was heavy and there was a rotting smell. A metal rod was laying on the ground. That must have made the thump earlier. There were paintings, which all were of different species of birds. On the wall there was a huge golden crucifix. It was very detailed and beautiful. Jesus on the cross had something red dried up under his eyes. There was a picture with the paintings. I took a look at the picture. It was of an old couple. I recognized the old woman, and she had an unsettling smile on her lips. The other person was the husband. He was pale, considerably tall, maybe 6'3", and wore a completely black suit. His haircut was perfect. Not even a single hair was out of place. The man definitely didn't give off a police officer's vibe. There was a writing desk and a chair, both made out of spruce, I think. On the desk, there were 3 notes. The first one read, "My name is Jonathan Rogers. My wife has started acting very strangely. She has started smiling in a horrifying way at me. Her eyes do not smile at all, but her lips are almost overly stretched. She has also started making strange requests. She wanted me to get rid of the golden crucifix in the living room. She used to love that thing. I didn't dare get rid of it though, so I moved it to the basement wall. This is weird. I wonder what her problem was with the crucifix. Why wouldn't she take it with her? The thing's made of gold." I picked up the second note, which read, "It's Jonathan Rogers again, and there is something seriously wrong in this house, and my wife won't admit it. According to her, I am insane and just paranoid. I have set up multiple cameras and motion detectors in the house, and they trigger at night. There is something moving in the hall between the guest room and the bedroom, which leads into the bathroom, and it likes to watch while I sleep. My wife denies it completely though. I get this horrible feeling of dread, like a deer in the headlights of a car which is about to ram into it and end its life. I can't take that horrible claw appearing at the edge of the door, and that red eye drilling into my soul at night. There is no escape from it outside of the house either. Something is moving out there, and I can't seem to catch any footage of it. I have to get out of this house before it's too late." "What in the hell is going on here?" I screamed in my mind. I felt trapped like a rabbit, but I need to find out more. Is the thing that watched me real after all? I picked up the final note, which read, "It's Jonathan Rogers for the final time. It's been 2 weeks since the last time I wrote. Everything has gone to hell. I think the thing is wearing my wife's skin. I wake up every morning with scratch marks, and when I walk through the hall where the creaking comes from, I sometimes hear a sharp exhale behind me, only to turn around and find absolutely nothing. My wife has started to give me the same stare as that red-eyed creature every now and then. This morning I couldn't take it anymore. She approached me with this wicked smile. I kicked her leg hard and ran into the basement. I've locked myself in. Whatever the creature inside my wife is, it has started pounding on the hatch. Maybe there are two creatures, I don't know. All I know is that the crucifix keeps that unholy bastard away. Every time it's close, the eyes of the crucifix starts to bleed. It can't keep the thing away forever, though. I'm going to blow my head off. It's a lot better choice than getting skinned and eaten alive. After reading the second note, I felt sick, and the third one didn't make it any better. That woman had lied about her husband and made everything seem normal. It was all a trap. I went and opened a small door, which seemed like a weird in-basement closet. And now the rotting smell overtook the whole room. The closet had even somehow kept the smell away. There was the corpse of Jonathan Rogers, the man who wrote the notes. It was decaying and overall disgusting. I threw up on the floor. I picked up the golden crucifix and ran into my room, and picked up my phone and my laptop, making a run to the living room. I saw something move outside. It was quadrupedal and running around the yard. I quickly ran back into my room, closed and locked the door. It has been multiple hours and the darkness has descended. I lay on the bed writing this post. I'm hearing a knocking and scratching at the door, and the crucifix eyes have started to bleed like if there was a tiny waterfall of blood inside. I can hear a voice behind the door before the knocking starts. It says, "Let me in." The knocking and the scratching started quiet and have become louder ever since, and then they suddenly stopped. The creature has now pressed its face against the window and is looking through it into the room. The neck is long and thin, the skin is pale, and its eyes are red and bulging. The mouth is stretched into a sickly smile, and its head keeps twitching. Someone, please, help me. The Ants Are Acting Strange by Book of PDR. I liked ants when I was a kid. I remember I did a project on them in the 4th grade, and for a year or so after, I was full of ant facts that I would share with any adult willing to listen. They seemed like neat, industrious little insects. These days, I'm more terrified than impressed. Earlier this year, I moved back to my childhood home, ostensibly to get some writing done. Since my late teens, I've lived in the city and, sure, I wrote, but not as much as I'd like to have done. I'm just too easily distracted, I guess. My dad's place is in a small town on the Canadian East Coast where, and I mean this in a good way, there's nothing going on. At least, that's how I thought of it a year ago. I wanted fewer distractions, and the small town I still occasionally called back home seemed like the ideal place. My father was retired, but made it clear to me that he wasn't lonely. He and his friends had active lives, and he didn't want his nerd daughter hanging around and cramping his style. He was kidding, of course. He was happy to have me home, but it was true that he was often away on trips with his hunting and camping buddies. I could go a week or two without seeing him sometimes, so I had the place mostly to myself. It was indeed nice and quiet, but I'd be lying if I said I immediately set out to writing. Turns out, I can get distracted anywhere. I'd arrived in town in the late spring, so the weather was nice enough for me to begin a daily walking routine. Usually I'd spend about an hour just walking around town. I told myself I was using the time to observe the world, get ideas, and think. Really, it was procrastination, pure and simple. I can tell I wasn't paying especially close attention to the world, because I'd like to think I could have noticed how eerie things were a lot sooner. There were definitely warning signs. Most of what I'm about to tell, the early parts anyway, won't be in accurate chronological order. I saw strange and confusing things, but didn't make note of them. I didn't mentally connect them all until later, looking back. But I'm still going to go into as much detail as I can manage. Here goes. There's something going on with the ants here. They're up to something. To begin with, there are just an awful lot of them around in general. Obviously, I remember seeing ants when I was a kid, but they're ubiquitous now. I couldn't go 2 steps outside without seeing them bustling about. They were in the grass, on the driveway, on the trees, along the sides of the roads, big ones, small ones, all marching about for their mysterious purposes, day and night. I remember seeing a line of them climbing the outer walls of the bank on Main Street on a rainy day. On another day, I saw a group of them carrying a dozen or more dead spiders down the sidewalk. They're always up to something, I said to myself that time. I never saw any inside though. Outside, they were everywhere. I couldn't help but notice them. But once I was inside a building, none. I mean, that's a good thing obviously, but it still mystified me. The gas station bathroom with a door that's always ajar? No ants. The filthy floor of the worst diner in town? No ants. My father's garage? No ants. So even though they were everywhere, I didn't think too much about them. Occasionally when I was outside, I'd get an itchy feeling on my skin, but once I was back inside, it was fine. They were out of sight, so I didn't worry about it. It was probably like this always, I thought. I'd been in the city for so long, I must have forgotten. When I mentioned it to Dad one time, he dismissed it. I kept up my walks as we got into summer. There's a path through the woods that runs past my dad's place. Taking the path makes it only about 15 minutes to Main Street area. About halfway down that route, there's a decent-sized field that, as far as I know, isn't a part of anyone's property. It was just scenery to me until one day I happened upon 3 cats sitting in the field. I often see posters for missing animals around downtown, so I stopped to look. Though I probably would have stopped anyway. I like cats. They sat in a semicircle, not far away from the path. I could have walked up to them with just a few paces, and I may have done so if I hadn't noticed what they were seated around. There was an unassuming mound at the center of their grouping. I could tell from where it was an anthill. Presumably it had been there every time I'd walked past, but I never had a cause to notice it. I watched the cats for a few minutes, expecting them to attack the ants or something. Instead, a 4th cat came trotting out of the woods at the far end of the field. I noticed it was holding something in its mouth. When it got close enough for me to make out, I determined that it was a dead squirrel. The new cat hesitated, looked at me for a second, then came up to join its fellows. It walked closer to the anthill, dropped the squirrel, and backed off to join the others in the semicircle. Instantly, ants coated the dead rodent. The cat sat there watching. The newcomer looked at me again, and in a white spot on its face, I saw a handful of ants walking over it. I opted to continue on my way home. On another occasion, walking that same path, I noticed someone walking through the woods. It was nearing sunset, so I couldn't make them out clearly. But they were wearing a bright white shirt and pants, which caught my eye even from a distance. It was rare enough to encounter someone on the route, let alone someone making it harder for themselves by staying in the woods off the path. As far as I know, there's not much worth seeking out there, and given the uniform-like outfit, I thought maybe instead of a recreational hiker, this was a forest ranger or something. I stood and watched long enough to see them pass by a clearing that left them silhouetted against the sky. There I noticed they were wearing some kind of headgear. At the time I thought it might be a novelty helmet with jokey antlers, but as I made my way home, I realized what they seemed closer to. Antennae. Writing this all in one place here like this, it certainly makes it all seem related. I feel dumb for not getting curious sooner, but as single occurrences over the course of several months, I hadn't lost any sleep over it. Things got a bit more personal for me about a week ago. Dad was home one night and we were eating supper together in front of the television. He had just finished telling me some anecdote about what had happened on his latest trip when a commercial for a local extermination company came on. The exterminators on the screen were wearing white outfits, similar to the one I'd seen on the guy in the woods that day, however many weeks before. I said as much to my dad, adding, but the guy I saw had weird things on his head, and made little antenna motions with my fingers. I thought he might have been mildly amused, but instead, Dad just got quiet. Just a coincidence, he said finally. I don't know, I said. There's an awful lot of ants out in that area. Maybe the exterminators were doing recon or something. preparing for war. Again, he didn't react like I'd hoped. Maybe, he said with a grunt. Anyway, you should probably steer clear of the woods, in case they got chemicals out there or something. He changed the topic then, and I let him. There had been a sudden worry in his face that made him look so much older than usual. I wanted him to be happy again, so I let him control the flow of the conversation. But I didn't forget it. The next day, I arranged to have lunch with my only real friend in town. Stella had gone to school with me, married her high school boyfriend, and was still living there. I often jokingly refer to her life as my idea of a living hell, but she was genuinely happy as far as I could tell. As usual, I walked into town. I didn't take the path, for the record. I met with Stella at a coffee shop near the post office where she worked. We had seen each other just a week before, so we had a little catching up to do. As soon as we had received our drinks, I dove into the conversation about the anthill near the path and how I thought exterminators had been looking around the area, and how my dad said there might be chemicals. She laughed. "Well, I can assure you it isn't that," she said. "What do you mean?" "Just that you don't have to worry about any exterminators gassing your field. It's sort of a protected area." She blew on her tea. "But you shouldn't even be talking about it. It's all fine. Just forget it, and don't bring it up to anyone else." Though spoken softly, that last thought carried the intonation of a warning more than simple friendly advice. After that, I let another person change the topic on me. Soon her lunch break was over. I began the walk home again. I wasn't in the best mood, so I decided to stop into a nearby convenience store and gas station to grab some snacks. On my way out of the store, I crossed the parking lot just as a car pulled in. It was bright yellow, and though I don't know cars, I could tell it was expensive. He was obviously an out-of-towner who'd come off the highway. He pulled up to a pump and inserted a credit card. The car was clean and shiny, so it was easy for me to notice the line of ants crawling up the tire, onto the body, and disappearing into the crevice of the trunk. I wish now that I'd told the man. At the time, all I could do was watch, dumbfounded, pretending to tie my shoe and stretch before my walk. The entire time he filled his tank, his trunk was also being filled. When he replaced the gas pump into its holder, the stream of stowaways ceased, and before I could understand it, he was driving off to parts unknown with a trunk full of ants. I walked home, still avoiding the path. Dad was nowhere around. On a whim, I looked up the phone number for that extermination company and called. I gave them my address and said that I'd been seeing ants around the house and wanted them to come and get rid of them. "We don't do ants," the man on the phone said. I asked him what they did do. "Vermin, rats and termites, that sort of thing." "Well, actually, I think what I've got might be termites. I'm not an expert. Could you have someone come take a look?" "We have no reports of termites at that address," he said. I didn't know how to reply to that, and hesitated for a moment. The man, apparently accepting my silence as the final word, said, "Have a good night." He hung up. I was stumped. I sat on the living room sofa, my mind crawling over various details, but unable to find the connective path that made sense of them. The sun set. Eventually, I went to bed. I don't know what initially roused me, but once I was awake, I immediately started gagging. The air in my room was thick with an acidic odor. Moonlight was coming through from the edges of the curtains, but still the room seemed somehow darker than normal. I couldn't tell why until I reached to my nightstand and turned on my lamp. My walls, usually white, seemed nearly pitch black. They also seemed to be shimmering, writhing, teeming. The walls were covered in ants. I screamed. The wall of ants wriggled as if it was now aware I was awake. I coughed and tried to catch my breath. I covered my mouth and nose with a blanket so I could breathe. Through watery eyes, I noticed that a part of the wall was brightening up. The ants were opening up a hole in their insectile mass through which I could see my wall. This white negative space was soon joined by other such holes. The ants were moving, making the holes into shapes. After a moment, it was clear that the holes were making letters. A word. Leave. After only a second, the ants began shifting again. They remade the negative space until it said, 2 days. Then again, they moved until it said, no more. Finally, they resumed the first shape and the message was, leave again. That held for a few moments before I noticed that the ants at the edges of the walls were trickling away, through the cracks around the door, through the air vent in the ceiling, through the electrical outlets. They vanished. The line of ants surrounding the letters were the last to go. I spent a few minutes sobbing. I don't know how long. When I ran out of tears and worked up some nerve, I got out of bed, made my way to the bathroom and threw up. I opened a window to get some fresh air. My skin crawled. I washed my hands and face more than once. There were no ants on me, but I felt itchy. When I left the bathroom, I found no ants anywhere else in the house. Believe me, I checked. In the kitchen, I found a piece of paper. It was an unsigned note with my father's handwriting. Do as they say. They are only sparing you for my sake. I will miss you. And that was it. Obviously, I didn't sleep again. I began packing. The ants gave me 2 days, but I wasn't waiting around. I knew this would be the last time I'd see this house. I'd probably, hopefully, never be in this town again. But I still packed as light as I could. Just enough clothes to get by, some family mementos, my computer. After a half hour or so of work, I was carrying an armful of books down the hall and nearly dropped them when I jumped in shock. I had heard a voice behind me. I spun around, not sure what to expect. Had the ants changed their mind? The hall was empty, but the bathroom window was still open. I could hear people outside. I reached into the bathroom to turn the light off, made my way furtively into the room, and shut the door behind me. The moon was on the other side of the house, so there was near complete darkness. When my eyes had adjusted, I crept up to the window and peered out. A line of people were marching by at the edge of the property, moving toward the path, toward the field, toward the anthill. Men, women, children. There were cats and dogs in the line too. They all moved in single file. The humans all wore white outfits and helmets with antennae on them. This parade lasted for 5 or 10 minutes. When they spoke, it was nothing consequential. "It's going to rain on Monday," I heard one woman say. Some of them were carrying things, including one old man who held a rifle. I'm certain that man was one of my father's hunting friends. I expected I'd see Dad in the line. I'm not sure if I hoped to see him or dreaded it. I feel like I'd probably have more closure if I had. I didn't, though. The line eventually ended and there was silence outside. I finished putting my stuff in my father's car, checking the trunk for stowaway ants more than once. I didn't open the garage door until I saw the first glimpse of daylight. I was speeding down the highway before the sun had finished rising. I'm never going back there, but I'm definitely going to keep an eye on the ants in the city, and I suggest that you all do the same. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, don't forget to hit the like button, and subscribe if you'd like to hear more. If you have any suggestions for future episodes, feel free to leave them in the comments down below. And don't forget you can listen to these stories on Spotify. Link is in the description down below. And as always, pleasant dreams.